Native Land Pod is a production of iHeart Radio in partnership with Reasoned Choice Media.
Welcome home, you guys. It's a really busy political season. So you guys heard on the main episode, we talked about, is the Democratic Party's tent too big? And so we thought it would be a good opportunity to talk about what is it that we want from our political institutions, and specifically the Democratic Party, but maybe that and beyond. So we wanted to have that conversation with you all today. Angela, this is something that came to us from a viewer question, and you thought it was important enough for us to talk about in a larger capacity. So why don't you kick us off with your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that what I am really struck by are the number of people who feel abandoned by a two-party system, and most specifically based on the people that I speak to the most, or the people who even write into our show, comment under our posts, or they send in videos. Folks who feel abandoned by something that they've been very, very loyal to. And I think those criticisms are fair. I think what's striking are the folks who the party has gone to court, has gone to pursue, and thereby leaving its base. Those folks don't feel seen or heard either by the party, allegedly, right? Like when we look at the math, which ain't math, and from the most recent election, hundreds of millions of dollars were spent to court Nikki Haley voters, then Liz and Dick Cheney voters, then Never Trumpers, all of these folks. And it looks like, I know, Tiff, you said that we shouldn't rely on this data yet, but based on the data that we do have, at this point, I doubt it'll change that much. Certainly won't get over into double digits. 4%, right, of Republicans voted for Kamala Harris in this last election. So to me, I just don't understand. I'm not, the best business person in the world, not the best business mind. But I don't understand that ROI. That return on investment doesn't seem sufficient. And then when I consider my own needs, my family has always voted for the Democratic Party. I can't think of a time where my parents didn't support the Democratic Party. But in Seattle, Washington, where I grew up, my dad has been on the opposite side of every elected official because he's an activist. He hasn't always garnered friends. He's garnered some friendships and some working relationships, but I think largely I have mostly felt abandoned by the party. My dad, one of his more recent battles with the governor of the state until soon be recently, is Jay Inslee. And when you look at the contracting dollars, right, of Black folks who are in business in the state and the number of contracts that they actually gain from the state, it is ridiculous. We're talking about like 0.001% of contracting dollars going to very qualified Black businesses. So I guess what I'm saying is, I don't know where we really fit, because some of the things that we are actually fighting for as a people should not be partisan either.
That's right.
So I don't think that whether or not a Black business is qualified and gets contracting opportunities should be partisan. I don't think that voting rights should be partisan. I don't think that domestic violence or women's choice of reproductive justice should be partisan. So part of me feels like, why should this be a struggle for either party when this is just like, what is right? What is humane, right? So I struggle with, like, why am I having to ideologically align with any party in this instance on these set of issues? Some of these things find they're partisan. Let's talk through these. Like, I don't think livable wage should be partisan, but I want people to earn a livable wage. I don't think that climate change should be debatable, but for whatever reason it is. But I also want to figure out, in our Haslow's hierarchy of needs, can we align on what our value systems are, and what party, if there's a party, can support those things? I know I just talked in circles. My bad, y'all.
No, that's real. I agree with you on what you have identified as what really should be nonpartisan issues. Mm-hmm. But it seems the other side works overtime to create the divide, and I can't really gather for any other reason than to build their own political power. Mm-hmm. It's like, I've got to be opposed to a woman's bodily autonomy because we got a whole extreme, quote, Christian coalition who are betting on us to hold this position. I've got to be against DEI and equity and inclusion and making sure we have the reverse workforces, because I got a whole group of people sitting over here in my back frame who are counting on me to keep this workplace white. And so I don't even know that. I think you would find that there are people within the party structure who would say these are kind of natural and frankly human rights that ought not be divisive by and large. But that's not what we're getting these days. What really alarms me, first of all, I was visualizing Eddie Rye standing up to Jay Inslee, and Jay Inslee better fall back. But in all seriousness, what I'm most concerned about as it relates to the party system, two things. One, already, for instance, in the state of Florida, the largest political identity is Republican by about 1 million votes over Democrats, but then they're being closed in on by independents. So we almost have a third, where folks are choosing no party. Now, there's a consequence to this. In my state, we have closed primaries, as exist in almost the majority of states around the country, where if you don't belong to a political party, you may not vote to select who gets to become the nominee of that party for governor, for U.S. Senate, for really important seats. And that is troubling to me, because it's just now at the point where Black people can choose nominees of their choices in a lot of states, where younger people in coalition with the Black and brown community can choose candidates of their choice. And right at that very moment, we're now seeing defections from the party and into an independent structure who don't have a voice in that process. So that alarms me at one level. The second thing that alarms me as we think about takeaways from this last election is just the same theme of the independents in their performance have outperformed Democrats, meaning more people who were non-party registrants and registered as independents. They showed out the second highest of all groupings of voters by party, including over the Democrats. And what is that saying? And I think the complexity, the problem that the Democratic Party faces, which I consider myself a member of and have had at various times leadership in, and have been my state party standard bearer when I was a nominee for governor of Florida. And I took that as a real serious responsibility to speak to the needs of the people in our state who had basically withdrawn themselves from the process, their belief in and their faith in the process, because after all the sky is falling and after all the promises of what I'm going to do when you put us there, these folks still, by and large, are finding themselves in the same unchanged political and social and living environments. And so I worry that if we aren't very strategic about where we decide to place ourselves, not only on the spectrum of identity and politics, but also for the purposes of gaining political power so that we are at the negotiating table deciding what goes where and to whom, I feel that we negotiate ourselves into irrelevance. And I think it has to be balanced by a real strategy of building power, and then with that power, negotiating better positionality for ourselves. Because I can't think of a more generous people, a more inclusive people, a people who are so attached to the trauma that we've experienced over the course of our lives that we identify with any community who is experiencing trauma. We go to the defense, to the aid of. And then once those communities find themselves in positions of power, they negotiate us out of the table. They negotiate us away from power and away from positionality and away from getting what we need to serve ourselves, our families, and our communities. I don't know the answer, Tiff and Angela, but I do know that whatever that answer is, strategy lays at the center of it. And I think the strategy has to center our community and our community's needs, and everything else is subjugate to that. Not around a personality, not around a person, not around a part of a state or a state, but around our needs. And if you comport to that, if you can perform on that and for us on that, then we can talk. But outside of that, I receive what y'all were saying earlier around I can't be doing the coalition stuff right now, and I'm not all the way there, but I will tell you that my coalition is going to begin with the folks who I care about the most and who sit at the intersection of the greatest degree of harm and impact from this society, that's who's at the center of my coalition.
So I want to say really quickly first that there are a lot of, I would argue most states, if you do not belong to a party, you cannot participate in the primary. Mm-hmm. There are a few states that have what they call a jungle primary, which was what Andrew was referencing, where anybody can vote for anybody. There's some arguments to be made about that. There's also a lot of arguments around ranked choice voting, which means that, whoever got the most votes wins. Whoever got the second most votes, they can go to a runoff. Or sometimes
you choose options. This is my first option, my second option, my third option.
Right. Exactly.
And all those votes count.
Exactly. But what's interesting, we actually have a viewer question that speaks to, I think, a lot of what we're talking about.
Good evening, Angela, Tiffany, and my man, Andrew. This is Monte from Maryland, and I had a question for you. Just like you, I've mourned, I've asked numerous questions, I've avoided watching the news, and, now I'm at the point of acceptance, and now I'm wondering, based on something that you mentioned in your MiniPod about how we as Democrats failed at the ground roots level of reaching out to everybody and organizing at that place. What should we do right now? We got 4 years of BS that we know we're going to have to deal with, but what should we be doing right now to prepare for those midterm elections and especially for that presidential election in 4 years? Yeah, we're going to have a rough road to hoe, but it is what it is now. But what can we be doing right now? What do we do at the ground roots level? How do we organize at this point? What can someone like me who does not live in a swing state do to affect the overall for the country? I just want us to have a goal and something in mind to motivate us for these next few years as we deal with what we're going to deal with. But any ideas you guys have will be most appreciated. Thank you for all you do, and welcome home.
Welcome home to you, Monte, from Maryland. I love that question. And, I think Andrew as a politician and Angela as a strategist definitely have a lot to say about it. What I would say, the first thing that is really important to me, especially as a Black man, you can stay informed and share responsibly. Like I always say, though you're not in a swing state, Maryland is solid blue, but I'm sure you have friends outside of Maryland who might be in swing states, who might not be as engaged in the process, who might be frustrated like we all feel, who might be ready to tune out and kick back and just throwing up their hands like F it, because I know I feel that way on some days. And you can be talking to those people, checking in, letting them know there are no off-year elections. There are still those local elections that matter. If you're a parent, show up to those school board meetings, encourage your other friends to do the same. The state elections that matter, the state legislatures, Republicans have made big gains there as well. So if your friends are in other places where that matters, pay attention to what's happening there. Even in Maryland, pay attention to what's happening there. And just don't tune out. Don't give up. I think that's keenly the most important thing. And consider yourself an organizer. I think it's also something important to say, even if it's not a swing state, right? Even though Maryland is blue, there is still a party infrastructure there. I'm not a member of the Democratic Party. I just vote mostly, or always I vote Democrat. But there's still a party infrastructure there that needs to be disrupted. You can still get involved on that level and make sure your issues as a Black man are heard, that you're represented, because that's what we have to start convincing our people. What does this democracy look like if you get to shape it? And I think why we saw people stay home a lot last cycle is they gave up on that part of the dream. They let America capture their imagination in the wrong way. So even if you're just tapping into the imagination of your group chat, your college friends, your boys at the barber, whatever it is, I hope you can be a voice to lead the people to a righteous belief in what America owes us. And as always, I would encourage you to tell your friends to tap into Native Land Pod, where we keep it a buck and we talk about things in a very plain, digestible way to make people feel very welcome and knowledgeable in this part of the process.
Tiff, I thought that was an excellent response. And really, all I would add is double down on your point around not a swing state, but you are a state. You are in a state, and that state has a mayor, bunches of them all over. They've got school boards. They have county commission races. They have municipal races. They've got judge races, state attorneys races, judges who seek public office. So if there was a thing that I would recommend, it would be I would get together with those friends who are concerned and are interested and are, a little bit displaced by what's happening at the federal level. And I would decide on some targets. How are those school board members performing for you? Are they out there banning books? Are they embracing curriculums that are inclusive of others? How are those city commission races? Are they appropriating money in your part of the community and in parts of the community that need investments the most? How are those judges doing? Those judges that like to be sleepy around election season so you don't notice them, but when it's not an election season, they are ruling against our people, not giving us chances, not seeing us as human in those courtrooms. I would start to interrogate right where you live whether or not the people are there and acting in your interest. The people who are there, if they are acting in your interest, and if they are not, the beauty, but also the disappointment about our process is in midterm elections and in local elections, the drop off of voters is spectacular, and I don't mean that in a good way. It is huge. The opportunity moment that creates is that you get to, frankly, if you can organize a few of your friends and hit some doors, you can pretty much elect the candidates of your choice to these local municipal offices. Make your targets now. Decide who's up and determine whether or not they are in service to you or not being of service to you. And then amongst you all, you figure out who you all are going to run. And I don't mean just this questioner. I'm talking for all of us. That's power that we can command. And then once those folks are in those positions, we can then elevate them to state legislature, into congressional seats, into U.S. Senate seats, and so on and so forth. I think y'all get the picture. But this democracy is going to be saved by each and every one of us acting right where we are. Swing state, no electoral vote. I'm not worried about that. I'm talking about how we rescue this place is by putting ourselves in position so that when the opportunity creates itself, we got folks who are right there ready to move into it.
And Martin O'Malley is trying to lead the Democratic Party. I don't know if y'all saw that news. He's right in your backyard. He's right in Maryland. So make friends and have him be sure to make you his friend. Sorry, Angela.
And that's definitely not an endorsement for the incoming DNC chair. Just to be super, super clear, let's go wide open race. I was going to say, Andrew, one of the things that I know that you are so gifted at is building a bench. But I would caution us about building a bench before we have a clear understanding of the needs of the people. Sure. Your last point was an excellent point around, really making sure that you are running people and there are ballot initiatives that speak to the needs of the people, of the masses. In order for us to do that, we got to do a lot more listening. Yeah. The question was, is the Democratic Party tent too big? I don't know the answer to that. But what I can tell you is I cannot think of a year where I felt fully seen by the party. I had moments of high hope. 1988, Reverend Jackson. I was listening to his speech this morning. Roland sends it periodically to a group chat that we all have. And I was like, I just want to hear about the importance of the Rainbow Coalition again so I don't lose hope in it. And I also think about 2008. Crying with some of our elder statesmen, some of our elder stateswomen about the importance of supporting President Obama for office. And I think about your race, Andrew. It meant the world to me to see you as a governor elect, I believed, who happened to be Black, but spoke to the needs of so many people. You were not myopic, but I also think that some of these candidates are once in a lifetime candidates. Yeah. They really are. Yeah. I felt like I might be potentially seen if Kamala Harris would have won. And I felt a little seen when Ketanji Brown Jackson and Kamala Harris were named, right, by President Biden. I just don't want us so distracted by the symbolism of a thing that we lose track of the very important substance of the thing. That's right. And right now, what I'm deeply concerned about within politics overall are the number of people who are erased in the process. The turnout this election was abysmal. It is irresponsible. It is reckless. But I don't hold that necessarily just over the people.
For sure.
I have to hold that over the parties. Who are you not speaking to? Who doesn't feel heard? How can we reach you? How can this podcast reach you so that we have an understanding of the needs of yours that are not being met, that should be by the political process because your taxpayer dollars pay for them to be met, right? Like, what do we need to do? I want to get underneath that. I do think the party might be too large, but I think the party might be too large because it hasn't figured out a way to adequately speak to the needs of all these people. I also think that it may not be large enough because as it is right now, there's not a clear path to victory. So that means that there's something missing. There are some issues missing. There's pieces of the platform that are missing. There's a Palestinian American that didn't speak on the DNC stage in the summer missing. There, we have a problem in this country. I'm saying we have a problem. Like, we got to figure out a way not to treat people like they don't matter and then just erase them and then hope they don't show up to vote against us. Like, that's not democracy to me.
No, but it is very emblematic of what it means to try to arrest power. And I think all parties, regardless of, affiliation, ultimately, that's what they're climbing toward. That's why elected officials aren't really out for everybody to vote. They're out for the people who are going to vote for them to ensure that they get out to vote. That's why we ain't doing voter rallies all over the city. We're doing voter rallies in places where we're trying to stimulate a particular vote to vote a particular way to achieve a particular win. And I think part of let me acknowledge that it is easier to do the job that Republicans have to do. It is much easier if we were their party, and that's because they are the majority, and largely are organized around the protection of that majority, and whatever ways we want to start to shred it, but largely we have power. And it is our job to keep it. And if that means I'm going to harm myself, but my alignment and proximity to the people who are at the top of that chain is so close that I'll benefit from it, then I'll make that sacrifice. So their job is easier. Ours is harder. And the other thing about our job is we think that everybody in that coalition shares our belief system along the spectrum of policies. And some folks are just there because the other side won't make a home for them. The other side will not be in coalition with them. And so they're here in this shared space, but quite frankly, they ain't standing with us on Black Lives. They're not going to stand next to you on issue X, Y, and Z. And so the listening part is going to be important, but then also some hard decisions are going to have to be made. If this is only cozy for you for this reason, hey, we can't rock.
Well, this is definitely a conversation that is ongoing.
Yeah.
We can't get to it all now. But
I knew that was
y'all.
going to happen.
Yeah, we all have so much to say about this, but we lose our just so you guys know. Normally we keep the party going, but we lose our video crew at a certain hour, and we definitely want to honor workers' rights here. So we have to let our video crew go
all the time.
Yes. So but we'll revisit this conversation many times, and would love to hear your thoughts and your suggestions about it. Like we said, we want to make sure that you all have a seat at the table too, and how you think we should move forward. So thanks for tuning into this MiniPod. Remember, our MiniPods drop every single Monday. You can catch them on YouTube. You can also get them anywhere you hear your podcasts, and be sure to tune in, and we'll see you next week on our main episode. We'll also see you every Monday on the MiniPod. Thanks for tuning in.
Welcome home, everybody.
Y'all.
Welcome home, y'all.
Native Land Pod is a production of iHeart Radio in partnership with Reason Choice Media. For more podcasts from iHeart Radio, visit the iHeart Radio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.